Life Groups. I'm Josh. I'm one of the pastors here, man. I'm so excited for us to dig in a little deeper and take a look at our teaching from this past Sunday and begin to ask ourselves, how can we continue on this journey of becoming better disciples of Jesus as we look at who has our heart, money or Jesus? Our parable or teaching that we talked about this Sunday was found in Luke chapter 12. What's interesting is that when our Wednesday group was preparing for this sermon, I remembered what one of my Bible college professors told me. He said, always look at the section above and below your main text and make sure you see how it's all laid out together. He said, nothing is random. So that's what I did. And let me tell you, the parable of the rich fool, which I've read probably hundreds of times, struck me in a way like never before when I put it in its proper context. So that's what I want to do. I want to help frame not just what is before the parable, which is what we heard Sunday, but also what comes after it, because I think that's just as important. Again, if we believe that the Holy Spirit was present and active as Luke penned the words of his telling of the life of Jesus, then this isn't accidental how chapter 12 is structured. So let's dive in, starting right in verse 1. Meanwhile, when a crowd of many thousands had gathered, so that they were trampling on one another, Jesus began to speak first to his disciples. So it's key to remember that Jesus isn't talking to the crowd. He's talking to the disciples, his followers. You and me are now included in the people he's talking to, and it's really important that we pay attention. Because in verse 4, we get a very serious and stark warning. Verse 4 and 5, it tells us, I tell you, my friends, do not be afraid of those who kill the body, and after that can do no more. But I will show you whom you should fear. Fear him who, after your body has been killed, has authority to throw you into hell. Yes, I tell you, fear him. Jesus tells his disciples, after warning them in verses 2 and 3, that everything we do, even things done in the dark, in the secret, will be revealed. And those actions, desires, and thoughts come with dire consequences. It isn't just about the one that can destroy your body. You got to understand, it's the one who can destroy your soul. The God of the universe doesn't just control your mortal life here on earth, but controls where you spend eternity. And your actions, your life, your decisions, and your heart will determine where you spend eternity. And it's with that warning that Jesus tells a story to his disciples. But even before he tells them a story, he gives them another warning. Verse 15, then he said to them, watch out, be on guard against all kinds of greed. That life does not consist in an abundance of possessions. Jesus says, watch out. Greed is lurking and is dangerous. You don't tell somebody to watch out if you aren't concerned for them. You're telling them to pay attention. My football coach used to tell me to keep my head on a swivel, meaning I always needed to be looking around, making sure no one was going to blindside me, especially on punt returns. And one time, I was tired and I was being lazy and I wasn't paying attention. My head was not on a swivel. I didn't do what my coach had told me, and let me tell you, my feet have never been that high off the ground. Somebody hit me from the side and I never saw them coming. You better believe from then on, I was always looking around. Like, it happened so fast. I think that is what greed does. It bombards us. And when we look up, we wonder, how did I get here? How did I get in so much debt? How did I get to the place where all my thoughts are consumed with wanting more? How did I get to the place where I've ruined my relationships for my desire to get more stuff? How did I get to the place where generosity is no longer a marker in my life? See, this is what greed does. It just consumes us. And what starts with a desire to be savers, to be prudent, to be cautious, to be wise, to long for security and comfort and independence, ends with sin. And that's what greed is. It's sin. And as we heard from passages in Romans, in Ephesians, in Colossians, in Corinthians, the company that greed keeps is with the wicked, the depraved, the idolater, the drunkard, the sexually immoral. Jesus calls greed evil, and so he tells us, watch out. Don't let it get you. Now look how Jesus connects the dots. Again, it's not accidental that these warnings are stacked together and followed by this parable. Verse 16, and he told him this parable. The ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest. He thought to himself, what shall I do? I have no place to store my crops. And then he said, this is what I'll do. I'll tear down my barns and build bigger ones. And there I will store my surplus of grain. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of grain laid up for years. Take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry. Our rich man has all that he needs. And now our rich man who has more than he could ever need gets more. He's got a problem. His barns are full. So what do you do if your barn is full? Well, of course, you build a bigger barn. And we all do this. I think most of us would say we have more than we need, but there's something in us that still feels the need for more. And what does this desire for our rich man bring him? You see, he wanted a comfortable life to live out his days, taking it easy. Verse 20, but God said to him, you fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. And who will get what you have prepared for yourself? A fool. Like, this wording is so strong. I don't think we get how harsh it is. If you grew up and had relationships with grandparents, or maybe if you're a little older, you probably were taught that to call someone a fool was like a no-no. Like, you just didn't do that. And that's what we read. And so what's the fate of this fool? Well, that this very night his life would be demanded from him. Again, don't fear the one who can harm the body. Fear the one who, after you've been killed, can throw you into hell. In this story, we see exactly why Jesus gave that warning. God looked at this man who was already rich, who had full barns, who had more than he ever needed, and when more came his way, instead of being generous, his first thought was, well, if it came to me, it must only be for me. And God's response was no. Actually, everything you have is no longer for you, but it'll be given away because your life is over. Greed got him. It was lurking in the bushes the whole time, and he succumbed to it. It cost him everything. He was only consumed with what this life would be, and he never thought about how he could leverage all his resources to build for him an eternal life. This story, though, is not just about this rich man's fate. Look at how Jesus wraps up in verse 21. This is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves, but is not rich toward God. Now, Jesus says, what happens to this man is what is going to happen to whoever continues to store up for themselves and is not rich towards God. So how do you and I make sure we are rich towards God? How do you and I use what God has given us to accomplish his purposes, not just to eat, rest, and be merry? Well, we give to the poor and needy. We're generous and willing to share. We invest in people and places that are advancing the gospel. These are the ways that we're rich towards God. These are the ways that we're laying up treasures in heaven. These are the ways we keep greed at bay. And as we started, it isn't just what's at the front that matters. What comes after this parable matters just as much. In verse 22, then Jesus said to his disciples, therefore I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat, or about your body, what you will wear. Our rich man was focused on his life, on being merry and eating, and it cost him his life. So Jesus commands us. He doesn't recommend it. It's not just that he encourages it. He commands us, his disciples, to not worry. To not worry about all of the things in this life, that God will take care of you. Jesus tells us, if he cares for the birds and the flowers, won't God care for you? You see, if you fully trust God to care for you, you won't be consumed with the many kinds of greed Jesus warns us to watch out for. And right after this command to not worry, look at how Jesus closes out this section of text. Starting in verse 32. Do not be afraid, little flock, for your Father has been pleased to give you the kingdom. Sell your possessions and give to the poor. Provide purses for yourself that will not wear out, a treasure in heaven that will never fail, where no thief comes near and no moth destroys. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Do you hear it? For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. This is all about our heart. From the warning to the parable to the command, Jesus has one goal in mind. He wants our hearts, and greed steals it away from him in ways that other things just don't. So let me end with a summary of what I think I see and what we see from Luke 12, 1 through 34. That as disciples of Jesus, we must prioritize a fear of God. We must recognize that chasing after material wealth is pointless, and that when you do that, there are eternal consequences. The true disciples of Jesus will live lives that reveal that we trust that God will provide for our needs. And then this faith and belief and trust in God, it allows us to focus on what truly matters. That we focus on investing in things that have lasting, eternal value instead of just accumulating possessions. So as you lean in now as a group and answer some of the questions that we've provided, my hope in prayer is that you're honest and help hold one another accountable as we grow to be better disciples of Jesus. So here are some of our questions to dive into.